And so if you see people with like these amazing, like their face just looks perfectly flawless and like perfectly lit on Instagram, this is how they do it. Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. So excited for today's video. Today's video is actually part 2. So if you haven't watched part 1 yet, I highly suggest you do, because today I'm showing you how I edit my photos, but part 1 shows you how I actually take my photos. So if you're interested in that, definitely pause this video, go watch the other one first, and then come back to this one. I'm so excited to show you guys now, after I've shown you how exactly I take my photos, how to edit them, and how to edit them with great quality. This is also going to show you guys how to create more of an aesthetic look to your feed. So I don't want to talk too much. I just want to go right into it. Make sure, if you haven't already, that you subscribe and hit that notification bell. I would appreciate it so much. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to open up is Lightroom. So this is actually an image that I took outside after filming that how I take my photos video for you guys. So the same principles pretty much applied, taking photos indoors as they do outdoors. So this is the same outfit. I just decided to pop out really quick and see if I could get a few good photos outside. I really love how this one turned out, and as you guys can see, it's pretty dark to begin with. I actually like to take my photos kind of darks to preserve those dark tones and not have a ton of grain in my image. So I like to edit to kind of brighten them up. So the first thing that I always do is pull open Lightroom, and I will go to optics, and I always choose remove chromatic aberration and enable lens corrections. This just makes it look a little bit brighter and kind of fixes anything that looks a little warped in the image. Next thing I do is go over to detail, and I will sharpen, and it just depends on the image. Usually I'll sharpen about 35, and then I'll mask it to about maybe 40. It just kind of depends on the image. I don't want it to look too sharpened, but I do want to bring that detail back. And then the next thing I'm going to do is go into the effects panel and clarity, and I turn that up usually to around 12 or 13, and that's just going to bring out even more of that detail and the edging, especially around my eyes and my outfit. I don't do much else in this one. Actually, I do go back to detail sometimes, especially when I have indoor photos. I always tend to do a little bit of noise reduction. Sometimes I'll go up to about 20 with the noise reduction, and then with the color noise reduction also around 20. So now going into color, I kind of like the way that the color is already in this image, as far as temperature goes, so I won't be messing with that at all. Sometimes if your temperature is off though, so like you can see this house behind the trees here is kind of blue. What I'll do is select that, the little dropper, and then drag it over to kind of change the coloring and make it look more of a gray tone instead of a blue tone. But as you can see, this changes my entire image, so I don't really want to do that as far as this image goes. So I think actually what I'll do is drag it over my shirt, and that just gives a little bit more of that warmth to the photo and makes it a little less blue, because of course I went outside and I was taking these pictures. As you guys can see, it was during golden hour, but golden hour was basically behind the trees. The trees just kind of block it out from my property, and everything by me was just a little bit blue tinged. So the next thing I like to do is go into vibrance. I always bring vibrance up to like 30, anywhere up to 30. I feel like above 30 sometimes is a little bit too much, especially for skin tones, so I try not to push it past that. I also take the saturation down to about -10 or 11, and this is purely for skin tones. So if you're taking photos of other things, then I wouldn't really worry about it. It's only if you don't want as much of the like orangey tones in your photo. Okay, and then the next thing I do is I'll go into mix, and then I can adjust each individual color. Usually with reds, I will turn them a little bit towards the orange side, up to like 4 or 5, and I will usually boost the saturation just a bit, because my lips tend to look really like grayish or purple if I don't add that color back in. And then sometimes with the luminance, I will go down just a bit. So about -6. It just depends on the image. I just want my lips to look a little bit darker. And then the next thing I do is go into orange, and I'll slide that slightly to the red shade, so around -4 or -5. And generally, depending on the photo, I'll turn the saturation down slightly to like maybe -5. And then the luminance is another thing that I like to play with depending on the image. So if I want to make myself look a little bit tanner, or I feel like the highlights of my face are a little bit too bright, I'll bring that luminance down. But because this photo is so kind of dark already, I feel like my skin doesn't really need to be adjusted in that way. So I'm just going to leave the luminance where it is. Another thing I like to do in the yellows now is bring the yellows to more of the orange side of the spectrum, so that it's a bit warmer. And then I usually bring my yellows down quite a bit, the saturation, because I don't love a ton of yellow in my image. But it just kind of depends on the situation, because obviously the yellow in the background looks really pretty and gives it kind of like this golden tone to it. But if I were inside taking a photo, for the most part, I get rid of the majority of the yellows. And then I also usually brighten up the luminance of the yellows as well, but I'm going to bring them down a bit for this photo to about -30. And that's what we're looking at so far. So now when I'm looking at it, I'm seeing a lot of green tones. So I'm going to go into the greens, and I'm going to bring down the saturation quite a bit to about -60. I'm also going to drag it a little bit more to the bluish side. This is totally preference based, because I don't know. Sometimes I just see how I'm feeling. Because I am leaving more of this like yellow goldeny tones, I might actually drag it more toward the yellow side just to play up a little bit more into those golden tones. So I'll do -60 there. And then for luminance, I always play with that as well and see what I like best. I think I want to bring the luminance down to -25. And of course this image still looks a little bit dark, but we haven't even started messing with the lighting yet. So this is just a preliminary edit of the colors, and once I adjust the lighting, I will come back and readjust the colors as well. Because there isn't a ton of blue in this image, the majority of the blue is in that house that's behind the trees. I'm just going to bring the saturation down. Now if this sky was more blue toned, obviously I would leave that, because I like to see a blue sky because we're outdoors. So I would leave the saturation or even sometimes intensify it. But because it's just in the background, I don't like it, and I don't want to draw attention to it. So I'm going to bring the light or the saturation down on both the teal and the blue sliders. And as you can see with that blue, it's affecting the luminance, and I kind of want it to be like less distracting. So I'm going to bring the luminance down a bit so that it kind of fades more into the background, but without looking too crazy. So about -25, -26. So that's all I'm going to do in terms of these colors right now. As you can see, this is the before, this is the after. It's starting to come to life. So now we're going to go into the light and mess around with that a bit. So first things first, I'm going to play around with the exposure. So +50 around there. And what I'm also going to do is raise up my shadows a bit as well, because I want to bring more light and more detail into my hair. As you can see, the higher I bring it, the more you can see like the strands of my hair. They don't look like just one solid color. I'm thinking maybe around 15. And then now I feel like my face is pretty bright, so I want to adjust that as well. Sometimes I'll play with the highlights or the whites. It just depends on the photo. I'm liking bringing the whites down a bit. I might also bring the highlights down a little as well. So highlights are at -40, whites are at -33, but I don't think I like that either. Sometimes if you mess with the whites a little bit too much, it will really flatten your image. So unless that is a style, an artistic style that you're going for, I'd be careful with pulling them down too far. I'm going to do like -15, -16. I think looks pretty good. And then I'll also bring down my blacks like -3. Sometimes I'll add contrast. Ooh, I kind of like how that looks actually. So contrast about 10. And now that I'm looking at it, I feel like my face is still a little bit too bright. I don't like that amount of highlight. So I'm going to bring the highlights down even more to about -90, and I like how that looks better. So I'm going to save that, and I like to do export as because I can choose the largest available dimensions so that I have the best quality photo, and then I'll hit save and it will pop up and I can save that to my camera roll. So now, of course, this is a beautiful photo. Like, I would totally post this to my Instagram feed. I think that it's gorgeous, but I have been just experimenting with different kind of aesthetic choices and things that kind of make it a little bit more unique lately. I've really loved that. So next thing that I have been doing lately is going into, sometimes I'll go into Facetune too, but that's usually when I have like white in the background so that I can whiten the background, make it a little bit lighter. And then sometimes, you know, I'll just bring it up anyway. We'll do a little bit of smoothing. I do a small amount of smoothing. So I like to zoom in, I take the smooth, and I'll just go over little bits of my face. I don't really like to go over like my smile lines too much. I go over my under eyes a little bit, but not like anything super crazy, because you know, it's normal, it's natural to have lines and pores and things on your face. So just some light smoothing. Let's see here, a little bit on the neck, a little bit on the chest, and just a small amount there. And usually I'll turn that down to like 80. So slight difference, but not anything too crazy. It just kind of softens those little lines of like where the light is a little bit harsh. Sometimes I'll go into details and go over just like my eyes and my eyelashes to bring them out a little bit more. And maybe I'll go around like the brim of my hat. Just swipe over my sweater really quickly because it does have that really pretty texture. I'll also go over my skirt because it has that plaid print. We'll go to 60%. So here's the image before and after. The next app I've been using is called Beauty Cam, and this one I actually just learned about. I absolutely love how it looks. So I'll go to Beautify, select my photo, and then I'll usually go over to contour, and this is the only thing that I do in this app. And so if you see people with like these amazing, like their face just looks perfectly flawless and like perfectly lit photos on Instagram, this is how they do it. So I like to turn it up a little bit, and it just brings, so as you guys can see, it just brings kind of more light to the center of my face and makes it look more high quality, more dimensional. I feel like it's really hard to get that look in some photos without it looking unnatural. Sometimes I'll turn it up pretty far. I think for this photo, maybe like 85, and you guys can see that like subtle difference in the light underneath my eye and a little bit on my forehead. It just kind of brings more light and more focus of the photo into my face. And go into the last app, which is Color Tone. And so this one, let's see here, we want to add a photo. We'll import, and then we'll select our photo and then go to the bottom left corner to edit. And I always start with a filter. So I did purchase some of these filter packs. They're like $3.99 for a pack of filters. I found two filters that I really liked out of here, and I kind of use one or the other depending on the photo for my feed, and those are the only filters from this that I will use so that I make sure that it's pretty cohesive depending on the lighting situation. So because this one is a little bit warmer, it just depends. Sometimes I'll use the Uluwatu filter so you guys can see the difference that made. A lot of the times I'll use that one on something that I want to be a little bit more, or something that has more of like a white or gray background. I always bring the filter down to about 30%. It just depends, but for the most part, I'll usually bring it to 30%. So I like how that looks. It gives it a little bit more of that like blue tone in the greens. It kind of brings that back. And I like it, but I also like to test out the other filter I like to use as well, just in case I like it better. So the other one that I like is Cootie, and that is one that I like to look a little bit more warm toned. So as you guys can see, when I put that on there, it gives it just a little bit more of that warm tone, especially in the greens and those bushes. If it's turned all the way up, this is what it looks like. It's a little bit crazy, so that's why I always adjust 30%. Just a little bit of that warmth. Gives it more of that stylistic look, but without being too overboard or changing my skin tone too much. So there's the filter. And then I like to go back to this bottom panel, and I will scroll over, and a lot of the time I've been loving adding grain to my photo. So this is totally up to you because it does give it a completely different look. If you want it to look super crisp, like it's just out of a magazine or something like that, then I wouldn't add any grain, but I've actually really been liking how it looks. So I'll usually add the grain between like 0.08 to 0.10. So obviously like that looks wild, but I just like to add a little bit, so when I zoom in you guys can see, like, you still see those details, but it just gives it more of that, I don't know, kind of like a film look. I'm not really sure how to explain it. I just really like how those photos look. I'll go to 8 so you guys can kind of see the difference here. I'll show you the difference in my skin. The grain also, I feel like, gives the photo just a slight pinch more contrast as well. So I really like how that looks. Then I like to go over to sharpen, and usually I'll bring that up to about 0.6, and that just sharpens it up a little bit more. And then the last thing that I like to do, and that I've been doing on a lot of my photos, it just kind of depends on how grainy I want it to look. Sometimes I will add dust. I'll choose number 1, and then I will bring that down to about 20. And so it's almost like you can't really tell at all. You can see it in my hat, but it just gives it a more film look. So if I bring it up higher, that's really pretty too. I don't super love that, like the ones that are over my face. But this would be a good way to add like maybe snow to your image if you were taking a winter photo. So I'll just keep it at 20. I feel like that looks the best to me, and I'm happy with that. So I'm going to export this photo. So we have our before image and our after image. Hopefully you guys found that helpful, and you guys can incorporate some of those tips into messing with your own photos and being creative. Editing photos is something that is just so much fun for me, and a way to kind of creatively express myself. So I hope that that was helpful for you guys. Let me know if you guys want to see more editing photo videos on this channel, because I would love to make more of those for you and, you know, kind of play around with different styles. So let me know in the comments below if you want to see that. Definitely give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, so that it can reach more people and help more people and help this channel grow, because I would be so grateful if I could do this full time for you guys. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and hopefully I will see you in my next video. Bye!